From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
It might not feel like it now, but warmer, sunny days are around the corner. Prime time for Rhode Island's hospitality industry. 4 years after the start of the pandemic, is business back to normal, and how big a blow has the Washington Bridge crisis been for local restaurants? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, interim president and CEO of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association, Heather Singleton. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi, and many of you are watching this on a Sunday, so happy Easter to everybody and a good time to think about warmer temperatures, the spring, the summer, and looking ahead to tourism. So we welcome Heather Singleton, interim president and CEO of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
So why don't we start broadly? What is the state of the hospitality industry in Rhode Island right now, and has it bounced back fully from the pandemic?
We have not yet bounced back fully from the pandemic. What I think we should first start with is overall, immediately when you hear hospitality, people are immediately thinking of restaurants. And yes, we have some of the best restaurants in the entire country, in my opinion, of course. But it's also lodging and tourism and transportation and all of those things that come together. It really is a full super sector that covers a wide range of the economy. But to go back to your question, yes, absolutely, we are still in recovery mode overall.
What exactly? You know, I think there will be people at home listening think, well, the masks are off, vaccine, the restrictions are gone. What would still be the effect now? Can you sort of tease that out a little?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think what we've been looking at a lot is just, we know inflation is up, insurance rates are up, labor is up. Every single expense that you can think of has increased dramatically. And so even though there may be some pockets of folks that are having increased sales, the money's really just going out the back door with all of these increased costs. For restaurants, most of them work on a very, very small profit margin just to begin with. And so now there are folks that are really just hanging on by barely a thread.
A big part of the post-pandemic tension with the hospitality industry was, everywhere really, was staffing and employment and getting people to work in the restaurants and the hotels and all that. Is that still as acute? Is that still an issue right now?
We don't have as much trouble with that as we did before. I think, when the pandemic happened, we were like, as a trade association, we do three things. We advocate, we have member benefits, and we provide education and training. And so we immediately went to those three things that we are really good at, and we continue to do so. We're seeing a lot more people who want to come into the industry because they see that it is a full industry of opportunity, not like others where you have this really tall, ladder that you need to climb in order to get promoted. I like to look at it as more of a lattice, where you can kind of bounce around from one department to another, go into hotels, but then transfer your skills over to another area of the industry. I think that's going very, very well for us. But where we are still in recovery is just trying to get back to those numbers of where we were pre-pandemic. One very, very small bakery that I know of just told me the other day, she said, in October of 2023, I was just starting to see my numbers come back to where they were previously, and now the bridge closed. And it's like a lot of folks that I'm talking to, they're feeling like, okay, we're taking like 2 steps forward, and now we're 5 steps back. Well, and it feels like we just can't catch up.
Let's talk about the bridge. Obviously, it was on. It was one of the things we wanted to ask about. And look, speaking candidly, sometimes reporters are getting pushback from state officials who suggest that the bridge problem isn't actually that bad, and the talk about the bridge is what's the real problem as opposed to the traffic. And I know, people commuting disagree sometimes and everything, but I'm just curious how real, how tangible of a problem has the bridge closure been for your members, particularly obviously in the zone around the bridge?
It has for sure been a problem. I don't think that there's, talking about how bad it is in the media. Yeah, that hurts us. It does hurt us, but that's not the only thing out there. It's never really one particular issue, of course, right? But we do have folks that we're hearing, when the bridge first shut down, it was right before the holidays, December 11th, and just we had companies canceling corporate parties, holiday parties, end of the year, corporate celebrations.
So stuff you weren't going to make up in February or March.
And with our industry, we don't have products sitting on a shelf that we can sell tomorrow, or we can try to sell by the end of the quarter and still be able to make up the sales. We are in real time in our industry. So once the breakfast rush ends, we can't go back and recover any sales that we would have made for that time frame. It's like once the 24 hours are done, that's it. And then we got to, try to play catch up tomorrow. So it's a very, very difficult industry to be in, but the entrepreneurs that make this their life, their quality of life, this is a really cool industry to be in, right? They're resilient. And we just want to do the best by them and see what we can do to help them.
In response to the Washington Bridge closure, the Small Business Administration in Rhode Island offered loans to businesses. Is the hospitality industry taking advantage of those? Are those helpful in any way?
They're not really helpful from what I'm hearing. I'm sure that they could be helpful to some who really need it. But a lot of our industry, we've already taken out SBA loans from COVID, and they're starting to pay back those loans, and this is just additional debt on top of the debt that they've already incurred. So it's not, for a lot of people I'm hearing, that's not helpful. What would be helpful is consideration of potential tax breaks, or maybe waiving any type of licensing fee or permit fee, or there's other, we are one of the most regulated industries in the entire country. We're paying a lot of additional fees and permits and, just renewals of liquor license applications and all of that stuff. So if there's any way that we can...
What kind of feedback from lawmakers are you getting on that proposal, or from the McKee administration on that proposal, if any?
Yeah, we're just starting to have those conversations with them. I mean, the first thing we wanted to do was we wanted to go directly to our industry, directly to our members. We didn't invite the media on purpose. We didn't invite elected officials on purpose. We wanted to, sort of keep it in the family, so to speak. Like let's talk directly with our own people. Let's come up with some ideas, come up with some suggestions. Let's kind of vet them out, make sure we have the data so that it's not just a bunch of hearsay either. That's a lot of, I think, what's going on there. So we are surveying our members. We're finding out where they're getting hit the hardest, what would be beneficial for them. And we're going to meet with the Small Business Committee in the House next week. We attended Mayor De Silva's resource event that he hosted in East Providence. So we're getting it. And I think that's one of the biggest things we can do for the industry is we are the voice of, that's the whole reason of having a trade association. So the more that we can kind of gather all of this actual data, real information, instead of just hearsay, that's what's going to help us.
I guess where I've been a little surprised since we just went through COVID is that during COVID there was very quick efforts to stand up these grant programs and things for the small businesses to kind of make sure their cash flow continued, et cetera. And as you just acknowledged, you're still in conversations with your members. There are no bills that I've seen filed for any kind of direct relief to bridges and the bridge. I mean, I guess how long do they have before they would actually need some help for the businesses? I think of places like Myrtle and Rosa's Tavern, the ones right near the bridge.
Right.
Can they go a long time with this without getting that kind of relief you're talking about?
I think it depends on your business model. And I think, we group restaurants in this, one type of category, but they are so vast and so different, and menus are different, and bottom lines are different. And so I don't know if we can kind of put everybody in one bucket. I think the difference between this and COVID is COVID was a major nationwide pandemic. And so a lot of states relied on the federal government to, get those programs into place and help there. This time, I feel like we're kind of on our own, and that's a very, very scary, scary place to be. So that's, I think, the difference. One of the
seconds left.
Okay. The biggest thing we're doing right now is if any restaurants that are in that area, if they're being affected, we're giving them a free membership. So call me, call our office. You're going to get a free membership for at least a year. And that opens up, that gives you direct access to other cost savings programs that we already have in existence. So we can start saving you money on your bottom line immediately without you having to put even $1 up front. So we want them to call us.
All right, Heather Singleton from the Rhode Island Hospitality Association, thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
When we come back, Ted's interview with the head of the January 6th committee, Congressman Bennie Thompson. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This week, the chairman of the January 6th committee, Mississippi Congressman Bennie Thompson, was in Rhode Island for a panel on democracy hosted by local Congressman Seth Magaziner. Ted Nesi sat down with both lawmakers for an exclusive interview.
Congressman Thompson, Congressman Magaziner, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with me during your visit. And I'm going to start with you, Congressman Thompson. We're a long way from Mississippi, your home district. Why are you in Rhode Island today? Why'd you make this trip?
Well, first of all, Seth is a member of the committee, and one of the responsibilities as the senior Democrat on the committee is I have to go and work with those members, look at their districts, talk about the issues, and basically be as helpful to them as I possibly can. So I'm here in chilly Rhode Island today.
A little colder than where you left.
Oh, yeah, it's about 80 degrees when I left yesterday in Mississippi, but nonetheless, I'm happy to be here, my first time, and so I'm looking forward to it.
And why did you want to bring Congressman Thompson here today?
Well, because our democracy is in a very critical and perhaps fragile place right now, and I think it's important that people understand the stakes of this election, understand that in order to have a well-functioning democracy, you need to have rule of law and a peaceful transfer of power. And I think that the perspective that Chairman Thompson brings
Let's talk about the January 6th committee. Of course, right now, but 18 months. You issued criminal referrals. Many of us watched the hearings, saw the evidence that you came out with. And as we sit here today, Donald Trump is poised to be the Republican nominee for the third election in a row. The polls show him with a narrow lead in the presidential race. Did the committee fail at its task?
Well, no, I think our charge was to present the facts and circumstances that brought about January 6th. We did, obviously. In America, we settle our differences at the ballot box. I can tell you without hesitation that Donald Trump was the cause of what occurred on January 6th. He did everything he could to change the outcome of the election. When he couldn't do it, he summoned thousands of people to Washington and sicked those individuals on his vice president because Vice President Pence wouldn't agree with it. But you know, in America, we settle our differences at the ballot box. I'm convinced that at some point between now and November, the people will speak. And they will speak loudly, and they'll support the Biden-Harris ticket. Donald Trump clearly misrepresented the office of the presidency and misguided the policies associated with it. So I think once people get into the weeds of the report, and I encourage people to read it, it's 850 pages, but nonetheless, the facts speak for themselves.
I'll bring Congressman Magaziner in a second, but I just want to follow up with that. You've been in politics a long time. What do you make of Donald Trump's resilience? Did you expect he would still be, based on what you'd seen in investigating and finding what you did in the January 6th committee, are you surprised he's still as politically strong as he is today? Well,
he is playing to a particular voice in this country, and people are listening to it, but I have faith in this democracy. I have faith that once people get the real look at who Donald Trump is, and as you know, he's in courts in New York, Washington, Atlanta, Florida. Justice sometimes is slow, but we still have the best system. So I'm convinced that Donald Trump will have his days in court. Some of them will be before the election, but I can't see this great country electing any one president with these many charges hanging over his head.
Congressman Alexander, you undoubtedly have constituents who are still supporting Donald Trump, who are going to see this story on the news tonight and say he's just being a partisan Democrat, and talking about democracy, but really this is just about Democrats versus Republicans. What do you say to someone like that who isn't convinced yet about the way you two feel about Donald Trump and his actions?
Listen, supporting democracy is a bipartisan cause. When Chairman Thompson led the January 6th committee, that was a bipartisan committee. He chose a Republican to be his vice chair, and Liz Cheney. And there are a lot of Republicans who I talk to out there who are conservative, but they are not comfortable with Donald Trump, because they know that when you try to stop a peaceful transfer of power from happening, that is anti-American. And when you try to overturn the will of the voters, that is anti-American. And so, we are a large country with a lot of different viewpoints, a diverse country, but it's clear to me that most people understand here in Rhode Island and across the country that what Donald Trump did on January 6th and the days leading up to it was wrong.
Do you think one of the things that happened in the wake of January 6th, Congressman Thompson, was the reform of the Electoral Count Act, which was the law about how you count the ballots and Congress's role, and part of ties into what happened with Vice President Pence? Do you think that would make a difference in a future scenario like January 6th, those changes that were made?
Well, there's no question the changes made it very clear that the Vice President's role is ceremonial, that there's nothing that individual can do other than conduct the count of the states. So I'm convinced that Congress did fix that part. But when we look back, we had never had that problem before to start with. So it was not something that was cloudy. Donald Trump created the cloud and tried to pressure his vice president to actually break the law to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. So our committee looked at it. One of the things that I'm convinced the public will view, a majority of our witnesses, over 85% of our witnesses, were card-carrying Republicans. It was not a partisan witch hunt.
One other question before we wrap up, Congressman Thompson. You're a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Last fall, Rhode Island elected its first black member of Congress. And I was just curious your reaction to see Gabe Amo, of course, a black first-time candidate in a majority white district, win pretty handily.
Well, it says that in this country we have come a long way. Before, to be a black member of Congress, you had to be from a predominantly black district. That's no longer the case. Rhode Island has set the gold standard for representation. We now, as Martin Luther King Jr. say, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Gentlemen, thank you both for sitting down with me.
Thank you.
When we come back, a reporter's roundtable with Target 12 investigator Eli Sherman. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi, and we're joined by Target 12 investigator Eli Sherman. Eli, we covered the Ethics Commission decision this week that could have put an end to a scandalous business trip by two state officials last year to Philadelphia. There are just too many details to get to on this. We have it on WPRI.com. That's how you remember the story. Thank you, Ted. Vegan cheese. Upshot is former State Properties Director David Patton agreed to pay a $5,000 fine in a settlement, but former DOA Director Jim Thorson did not agree to settle the ethics complaint against him. Here he is at the meeting on Tuesday.
If I thought I did wrong, I wouldn't be here right now.
There he is. So, Eli, summarize it. Let's look ahead to Thorson. So what this means is there will basically be a trial against Thorson. What's the ethics case against him?
Yeah, so there will be an administrative trial, which is a little bit like court proceedings where they'll call him in and ask him questions, and there's a prosecutor, and then the ethics panel will decide whether or not he violated the state ethics code, 2 of them, and then an additional Rhode Island general law around procurements. And it's pretty significant because the maximum penalty that he could be facing if he's found in violation of these 3 different things and assessed the maximum value is $52,000. So if you think about Patton, who decided to settle, He paid $5,000. Thorson, in this case, he feels like he hasn't done anything wrong, and he wants to fight it. But of course, that comes with some risk. But
the Ethics Commission doesn't have to levy a $52,000 fine at the end of the day if they decide there's enough evidence to support the violation. Right?
Exactly. So even if he is found in violation of all three of those things, they don't have to go to the max. The last case where this happened was Gail Corrigan, who is the former East Greenwich town manager, who was found to violate 3 different parts of the Code of Ethics, and they ended up only assessing a $3,200 fine on her. That was back in 2021. So these trials are very unusual that it actually gets to this point, and it could go even further than that, Tim. If the ethics panel finds Thorson in violation of these, he can then appeal that to Superior Court, which starts another process that happened with Judge Flaherty, I think back in 2019, where he appealed the decision from the ethics panel up.
Thorson's facing certainly a lot of legal fees because obviously you need an attorney for all of this.
Yes, good point.
It's not cheap, but I guess there's some not wanting to lose face here, right? Mm-hmm. Like there is a public perception here that he may have violated the Code of Ethics. So he was an unethical player on behalf of the state of Rhode Island. He doesn't feel like that's true, and he wants to try and fight for his name.
What do we know about when we could see an administrative trial and all this? They didn't set a date this week, correct?
No, it's very much like court proceedings where they have to go to the different parties involved and see when all of their schedules line up. I don't think we're talking about weeks here. I think we're probably talking about months before something like that is set up. So, they come out with an agenda every month and we see whether or not those things pop up.
Of course, there's nothing to say that Thorson couldn't settle, right? But ahead of the administration, even though he didn't take whatever was on the table then.
How many times have you been in court and right before the trial is going to start, they announce there's a settlement?
That's right. It's called settling on the courthouse steps. All right, I do want to pivot real quick, Ted, because I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but Tuesday's an election day.
Yes, you wouldn't know it, but April 2nd, presidential primary in Rhode Island. Obviously, we're pretty sure that no matter what Rhode Island says, Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be the presidential nominees. I'm not expecting a high turnout. And it is kind of interesting because Rhode Island did this experiment of moving off Super Tuesday back in 2012 to late April. And it's not clear to me that's really added to Rhode Island's stature in the nominating process. But here we are. And of course, there is some competition on the ballot because some big names are trying to get elected to the Democratic National Convention. So that's going to be the more interesting thing to watch.
Ted breaks us down in Nesi's notes this week, so if you haven't read it, be sure to do that. Eli Sherman, Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. Happy Easter. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.